Welcome to the Erectile Dysfunction Radio Podcast. This is the podcast dedicated to educating and empowering men to address erectile dysfunction, improve confidence, and enhance the satisfaction in their relationships. This podcast is brought to you by ErectionIQ.com. Learn more at ErectionIQ.com.
Welcome to the Erectile Dysfunction Radio Podcast. I am Mark Goldberg, certified sex therapist. I am deeply passionate about working with men like you to help resolve their ED.
A vacation from erectile dysfunction is the topic on today's episode, kind of a double entendre, if you will, which is just fancy marketing speak for something that has two meanings. So today's episode is really a vacation from erectile dysfunction, where we're going to talk about this interesting thing that happens where a man will go on a vacation, literally a vacation from his life or from work, and they'll suddenly be in a better mental state, and perhaps erectile dysfunction, which was coinciding with some stress at home, seems to disappear. First of all, Mark, that's going to be the topic for today's chat. But before we jump into that, I want to ask your opinion. As a mental health expert, how important is it that we take vacations? And does a vacation necessarily have to be one where we physically get away? Or could just taking time off from work be sufficient? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first and foremost, share that as a non-mental health expert, just as a human being, I know how important it is for me at times to take a break, to take a vacation. I know that it does a lot for my own mental health to be able to do that. As a mental health expert, I think that is something that is applicable to, again, the overwhelming majority of people. Many people work hard. They're stressed. Getting an opportunity to recharge batteries, getting an opportunity to tend to relationships, to connect with one's children if they have children. These are all really important things. In terms of does a vacation have to be one where somebody gets away or just taking time off? I think this is a personal question. Many people enjoy staycations. They like being at home and just not being at work, and that works great for them. For other people, they do need a change of scenery. I think this is really a personal choice that people have to make based on what works for them.
And with your time working with men, specifically on the mental side of dealing with erectile problems and erection problems, have you heard of men who are able to get erections on vacation or when they are in a relaxed state of mind, but then they struggle with ED during normal times?
I hear about this all the time. I think it is for men who struggle with erectile dysfunction, I think this is common. Let me go a little broad here for a moment. Even for men who are not struggling with any particular sexual dysfunction, even if they have a healthy libido, I hear from couples all the time that they don't seem to be able to get their sex life moving in any substantial way, and they may go for long periods of time without engaging in partnered sexual activity with each other, and then they go on vacation and they're engaging in sex 2 times a day over a week vacation. But they know that as soon as they get back home, it's back to the routine. So I don't think this phenomenon is specific or unique to erectile dysfunction, but I think that there are probably a couple components of vacation versus home life that do allow for improved sexual function, improved libido, and improved relationships.
Is this similar at all to when a man can get an erection on his own but struggles with a partner? We know that's another common issue with men facing erectile dysfunction.
So I think the comparison is a good one. Let me take a moment to talk a little bit about some of the unique components that I've learned about from the men that I work with about vacation versus home life. So there's a couple things that are really important to keep in mind. I'll go broad here before I get specific. I think human beings are creatures of habit, and we develop routines, and we basically play out the script. We become comfortable with it. We know what's going to happen. we like that. We like having some predictability. Yes, of course, we all want spontaneity in our lives, but at the same time, we only want it in limited quantities and limited doses. So for a lot of couples and for a lot of individuals, there is a routine, unfortunately, a lot of times that includes a routine of avoiding partner sexual activity. We do the same thing every night, and she goes to bed before he does, or they sleep in separate rooms, or they don't have a process of initiating. What happens on vacations, though, is that just the setting forces a break in the routine. Not having the things that each person uses to regulate their emotions or to help facilitate the avoidance. When those pieces are removed, there's this capacity to reconnect because the routine is now broken. Of course, when people return back home, they're right back into that familiar pattern. So I think that is a common theme that people run into during vacation. Now, when it comes to the similarity between vacation versus home and struggling with a partner versus getting an erection on your own, I think what you're tapping into, Casey, is the angst or the anxiety that a man may experience with his partner, but is really not experiencing when he's on his own. And I think the same thing is true, is that these routines during quote unquote normal life include work stress, includes managing a home, includes all the pieces of life that are important, but are not very sexually arousing for a lot of people. They're not very connecting. And on vacation, a lot of that stress seems to disappear. A lot of just the uncomfortable back and forth components of a relationship are not really there. Everyone's there just kind of have a good time. So many people do a lot better on vacation. And I think many men with the combination of a break in the routine and a decrease in level of stress see a significant improvement both in libido and in sexual performance and sexual function.
How can stress in our lives be related back to erectile dysfunction? Are the two connected?
The two are intricately connected. Stress is a mind occupier. We've all been there. We've got ruminating thoughts going through our mind. There's so much we have to get done. We're not sure how we're going to get it done. A lot of times we think a tremendous amount about how to lower our stress, or we're worrying about how we're going to manage things moving forward. It's very, very difficult to stay engaged with a sexual experience or a partner. It's also a lot of times difficult for men to experience a libido, even for solo activity, when stress is that high. And I think all of that connects back into the importance of the mind being engaged and being interested in sex. And if the mind is basically filled or preoccupied with worries, there's not a lot of space there for being open and receptive to sexual stimuli.
How can being in a relaxed mood, such as one that happens when you're on vacation, how can that result in better erections?
So that's the flip side of what we were just saying, is the relaxed mood, I think, helps many people to be in a position where they are more receptive to, sexual stimulation. They're more receptive to their partners. They're seeing things in a little bit of a different light. They're not preoccupied with having to answer 300 emails and what's going to be on the agenda at work the next day, who's picking up the kids at what time. A lot of these worries fade, and the mind is now in a position where it's far more open and far more receptive to sexual stimuli. I think also what I hear from a lot of couples is that they actually see each other differently. I don't mean physically, but they see each other differently in like a little bit of a different role that helps to also forge more of a sexual connection that otherwise is difficult to feel in the day-to-day life that they have back at home.
You have established this is a common issue where a guy can get an erection while on vacation but struggle otherwise with ED. So what do you encourage men to do who are dealing with this? What do you tell them?
So it's a great question. The way I would say this is, I think vacations being a notable exception to an otherwise challenging struggle of erectile dysfunction is common. In other words, for men who are struggling with ED, the idea that when they go on a vacation or when basically the setting is correct, they're able to achieve an erection, I think is a common occurrence. So for men in this situation, I encourage them to look at, well, what's working when you're on vacation? What makes it different? And trying to figure out how we can replicate some of that in the normal day-to-day life setting. So for some people, it's a pretty clear bridge that could be laid out in order to do that. There's certain things that really work on vacation. There would be a viable way to do that back at home. And couples can be successful really on their own, even without particular guidance, at being able to bridge that gap. I am aware that all too often, couples who are on vacation are saying to each other, we need to do this more often. Why are we not doing this at home? And it all sounds great, until they finally, they open the front door and put their suitcases down, and then life, quote unquote, resumes, and they kind of lose that. But a lot of times that the solution is as simple as that. For other people, it's a lot more complex because it's not so much a matter of just breaking the routine and basic decreases in stress. There's certain mental states that are achieved on vacation that are a little bit more challenging to replicate at home. And oftentimes that takes a little bit more of an intensive therapy to understand why a person may be struggling with their partner at home, but they're able to kind of see them in a different light on vacation. How do we help them to achieve that state of being at home, or managing stress in a more guided and a more specific type of way, to allow for a person to really get to a relaxed type of level. So the first thing I encourage men to look at is what worked, and then figure out what, if any of this, is replicable. And if it's replicable, that's the first, step. If it feels like it's not, it probably takes a deeper dive with the help of a professional who can kind of work to bridge that gap a little bit better with you.
Do you have any other encouraging words for men out there before we wrap up today's episode?
What I would tell men is, if you're experiencing this phenomenon, what that generally indicates is that you are physically okay, you're physically healthy. What that also indicates is that there almost always is a way to bridge that gap and to carry over components. If you can do some of it on your own, great. If you need the assistance of a professional, just reach out. Find somebody near you who can help bridge that gap, because the experiences that you have on vacation are probably pretty positive. And while I recognize that we cannot completely replicate a sense or a feel or an experience of being on vacation during the throes of life, some of that can carry over and help to create a far more satisfying, far less frustrating sexual life for you and for your partner. And I would encourage you to take those steps sooner rather than later.
My name is Casey. I am the podcast producer here at ED Radio, and I want to tell you about a new program from Mark Goldberg, who is the sex therapist and host of this podcast. This program we are calling Anonymous Mastermind Groups. These are conference calls that will take place directly with Mark. Mark has been working with men for years regarding the mental side of why they are having erectile dysfunction. Men were listening to this podcast from around the world, and they were reaching out to Mark because a lot of them were learning for the first time that their erectile dysfunction may be tied to issues going on with their mind, their emotions, relationships that they were in. Mark has decided to launch these new mastermind groups where everyone's going to remain anonymous, and they're going to meet through an online conference call. Questions and comments can be submitted directly to Mark in real time through typing. There's no voice, no video, no real names will need to be used. So if you're interested, go to erectioniq.com/mastermind. That's erectioniq.com/mastermind, and you can learn more there.
Thanks for listening to the Erectile Dysfunction Radio Podcast. For more information on today's topic and understanding how the mind impacts erectile dysfunction, please visit erectioniq.com.